It is 8:30, and this is the meeting of the Legislative and Human Resources Committee of the Kent County Board of Commissioners. We'll go ahead and call to order, and because of the unique nature of this meeting, I know we don't usually do this, but Pam, would you go ahead and make a roll call?
Yes, I will. Commissioner Hennessy.
Here.
Coleman.
I'm here.
Melton.
Here.
Ponstein.
Here.
Skaggs.
Here.
Talon.
Here.
Bonk.
Here.
Teal.
Here.
Chair Steck.
I am here.
All members are present.
Wow, good showing all. All right, before we move into our agenda, I'm going to ask Wayman to make a few comments about the unique nature of how this meeting is being held, and particularly to the extent that there may be public who are invited to participate, understand how we're going to engage.
Yes, pursuant to Governor Whitmer's Executive Order 2020-48, the Kent County Board of Commissioners Legislative and Human Resources Committee, in order to protect the public health in conducting its meetings via electronic communications. Any member of the public wishing to listen to the proceedings or provide public comment may do so by using the internet connection or phone numbers and passcode that have been provided on the meeting notice. This information is also displayed on the video screen. If you wish to make public comment, you may raise your hand to the Zoom chat feature or on your device, or you can notify us at publiccomment@kentcountym.gov. Anyone who disrupts this meeting by using offensive language or your actions, you will be muted during this call.
All right, with that austere invitation, we will move to our starting item on the agenda, which is public comment. If there is anyone on the call or on the meeting that wishes to address the board or the committee of the board, you may do so, as Wayman indicated. We'll give it a few minutes in case anyone wishes to do so, and then Mary Beth, if you'll alert us.
Yep. There's no email, no chat indication.
No email, no chat indication. Sure.
All right. There is an alternative way, and that is if you're on video and you're jumping up and down, we'll take that as a sign you want to talk. All right. Does not appear to be anyone from the public that wishes to address the committee, so we'll move to item number 2, which is approval of the minutes of March 10, 2020. Is there a motion to so approve?
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Melton, supported by Commissioner, was that Talon?
I think I heard Matt Coleman.
Okay.
Yes, you did hear me.
All right, Commissioner Coleman, thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee? If not, we'll do a roll call vote to approve.
Commissioner Hennessy.
Sorry, I keep forgetting to mute. Yes, I approve.
Coleman.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Ponstein.
Yes.
Skaggs.
Yes.
Talon.
Yes.
Bonk.
Yes.
Teal.
Yes.
Chair Steck.
Yes.
And that motion passes.
All right, good. Thank you. We'll now move to item number 3, which is a report from Potomac Strategic Development. This is our federal lobbyist, and I believe this would be the first time that we've had the opportunity to have a report directly. I won't say live because it's not quite live yet, or maybe the new live. But at any rate, we have Steve Carey and Charlie DeWitt, I believe, online, prepared to give us a presentation.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes.
I think Steve should be online as well. Steve, are you there? Well, first of all, we wanted to just give you a little bit of a report. Over the past several months, I know it's been very crazy with 4 major spending bills going through Congress. Last week, a lot of people were expecting some more funding directly to states and localities. That did not happen. But I think that in the next round, we've been following that very closely, and we have good reason to believe that that will be part of the next package. But there's been a lot of tension. I think there's been a battle of sorts between political factions, especially in the Senate. We can talk to you a little bit about what's going on in Washington with that, and when the next package is expected. And
703.
hold on just a second.
We've got Steve on the line now. He just, we didn't recognize his
There we
number.
go. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank Charlie. You've been reporting properly, and you're dead on, so I don't want to interrupt. I will take it after you've completed, so go ahead and proceed.
I just wanted to start out, Steve, and tell me if I have this correctly. We're just kind of getting into what a lot of people are beginning to talk about, and that is when the next spending package will come out. Some people call it Phase 4. They call it CARES 2. There are a number of different
Okay.
proposals.
So Charlie,
in there.
I can take it from there. And by the way, everybody, I did hear you. I couldn't communicate. So Charlie and I can tag team this a bit. I would like to tell you, first of all, thank you. It's a pleasure being with you. I can't tell you how proud I am to be able to represent my home state county, having been raised in Kent County, and I've not lost any of what I got from my home state. So thank you for this opportunity. To the substance, just a quick update. I did talk to somebody yesterday who's a senior member of the Senate Appropriations Committee and happens to be a member of the Senate leadership on the Republican side, who just late last week visited with the president in the Oval Office, had discussions with Secretary Mnuchin and Secretary Azar, 2 of the key cabinet members, especially now because of the economy and the conditions around health care. And I'm going to go through these notes. He and I chatted about a number of different things, and I'll get through them as quickly as possible. And then Charlie and I can get to some of these specific issues that you, Wayman, had raised with us. But the 4th package, it should be noted that there already have been 4 packages. And so it's very important that you folks understand what we mean by the 4th package. About 8 weeks ago, the president submitted a request for $2.5 billion to address the coronavirus crisis. And that was, again, keep that in mind, a $2.5 billion package, because nobody realized the enormity of what was headed our way. So that was the first package. It ended up being $8 billion. Congress, the House and Senate weighed in, and so it turned into an $8 billion package to address unemployment issues, business issues, and some health care, of course. Then there was a second package that dealt with some insurance issues an enhancement of some of the healthcare provisions, and other lighter issues, but still consequential to various industries. That was a second package that not many people really pay attention to. And then there was the third bill, and that's where most people's attention was drawn to, and that was the CARES Act. And that was that $2 trillion bill that provided the Paycheck Protection Program, the $100 billion program for health entities to retain staff for supplies and keep the lights on and so forth, as well as the state and municipal fund. Now, shortly after the president signed that into law, there was a discussion among House leaders. The Democrats control the House, as you folks know, and there was not much of an appetite by the Senate Republicans or even House Republicans to consider a fourth bill until the unemployment numbers started to come in and as the coronavirus continued to infect at such a rapid rate. So what the Speaker had proposed in her fourth bill, which was going to be more employment, more healthcare issues, infrastructure, and so forth, they decided we better not pursue that quite yet. We've got to extend that third bill because the Paycheck Protection Program evaporated very quickly, and then the healthcare program evaporated fairly quickly. So they simply enhanced that bill, and that's what we call bill number 3.5 because it's an extension of that third bill. Okay, that was just signed into law. I think everybody knows that. The House and Senate passed it unanimously. Now we're talking about the fourth bill, which is actually the fifth bill, but we're calling it Corona Bill 4. Now, this is what's important. Right now, again, the Republicans are resisting. They don't think that we need to do it now. I think that they're concerned about the debt paid for us. They want to see if the economies can start kicking in a little bit. But the House Democrats are going to roll out a bill perhaps as soon as later this week, and if not, maybe the following week. According to my resource, there will probably not be much interest in pursuing a fourth bill until maybe June. With a little caveat, he says, that if the unemployment numbers continue to disintegrate and the coronavirus starts to move into different states as aggressively as it did in Michigan, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Illinois, etc., there would probably be a renewed interest to pursue a fourth bill more quickly. And again, according to him, he had said that the White House is prepared to spend whatever it needs to in order to get the economy rolling again. Now, the bad news from our perspective is this. As you have seen, and it's widely accepted, it's been in all of the media outlets, that there's very little interest in state, municipal, and county and other local bailouts. And that's what they're referring to it as bailouts. They think that it was because of poor spending practices in the past. I am only serving as a messenger right now. I don't agree. I don't have any opinion on this because you can't look at a certain number of states or counties and make that judgment. The fact is that counties, cities, townships, and states are hurting. So where we are at the present moment is that the Speaker is going to propose the Democratic bill fairly soon, and it will include funding for states and local government, and we will just have to see what plays out on the Senate side. And a few other things that may be of interest to you. Now, as you may have recalled, last year there was an infrastructure bill on the table. It didn't go very far because there was no general agreement among Republicans and Democrats on how to pay for it. In tandem with that infrastructure bill, and I think we all accept that infrastructure is cement, bricks, mortar, bridges, roads, etc. Well, the Speaker had asked the House Energy and Commerce Committee Chairman Pallone to introduce his own infrastructure bill to include clean energy, clean water programs, etc., broadband, workforce initiatives, and so forth, to kind of redefine what infrastructure actually meant. So that bill would move in tandem with the larger roads and bridges infrastructure bill. I bring that up because it is we probably could see that latter initiative attached to this fourth bill, and that would have positive implications for Kent County. So stay tuned on that. We will see how that plays out once it's introduced and the level of interest that the House and Senate Republicans have in that. It should be noted, though, I have seen some extraordinary bipartisanship on certain things, and this should be noted for the fact that we are a bipartisan state. We've got 2 Democrats in the Senate, we've got Republicans in the House, and I'm going to bring up an instance where a conservative, Mike Kelly from Pennsylvania, very conservative, has teamed up with a very liberal member from Texas named Sheila Jackson Lee to try to craft ways to infuse dollars into infrastructure programs into urban districts and in rural districts. So stay tuned. Those are other things that we may see in this measure, and that would also include telehealth, broadband, etc. So that's the broad picture of the fourth package. I hope I explained it well. Wayman, I would appreciate it if you could tell me if you want me to continue to elaborate or take questions on that, or if I should move into some of the questions that you had posed, Charlie and me, in the recent past.
I think it's really up to Chair Tech, so he can decide which way he wants to go.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Chairman, sure.
Since this is the first time we've heard from you folks, maybe you could go in and cover a couple of those other areas that you've been looking at. And then we'll
Yes,
take
Chairman,
we'll take questions.
You got it. One of the, we had already addressed, and I think it was, I hope I addressed it well, was just the next round of funding, because that has been first and foremost of interest, not just for you, but your colleagues across the country. So we'll have to stay tuned there. And Charlie and I can tag team the following because it's a pretty granular program, but it was, as you all know, the Fed announced the expansion of scope and the duration of the municipal liquidity facility. And for those of you just who need a refresher, the Fed Reserve Board on Monday announced the expansion of the scope and duration of this program, and it allows substantially more entities to borrow directly from the fund than initially announced earlier April. This facility it's part of the initiative to provide, I think, just north of $2 trillion in loans to support households, businesses, communities generally, and it should offer up to about $500 billion in lending to states and municipalities to manage your cash flow and the stresses caused by the coronavirus pandemic. I think I summarized that well. Charlie, I don't know if you have anything to enhance my explanation.
Thanks, Steve. And we've sent you all just a little bit of background. They just came out with Treasury just came out with some details about it, but they basically revised it to include counties of 500,000 residents or more and cities with 250,000 residents or more. And again, that allows folks to borrow directly from this MLF and expands that and allows more loans to be available for counties and municipalities. So we can provide, answer any questions on that or provide more information if need be. I think another issue is that we provided yesterday. Another issue that has come up several times was how to spend what is allowable for if you get federal funds. What kind of spending is allowable? And we've also received some recent guidance from Treasury on that, which we've shared. And I think on some of these things, we'll just go ahead and send that, circulate that around as they come in, as far as these guidances and news releases from Treasury and other federal agencies on everything that's going on.
And then I think one of the issues too, funding from the CARES Act, the $150 billion coronavirus relief fund. I know that you submitted your CRF application to Treasury on April 10, and it was not until April 24 that word finally came down that the application was approved. We continue to make inquiries to the Department of Treasury and a conversation even with the Chief of Staff at the Treasury, at the Office of the Treasury.
And
Another
we received
issue.
that funding. Yeah.
Yes, well, that's great news. That's great news. The general funding from the CARES Act. I know that there's still some question on money flow and use. That is a question that keeps arising. And when in question, keep receipts. And I know that you would anyway. But that we had talked to a former FEMA official during, he was a FEMA official during the Obama administration, because the FEMA officials today were just so overwhelmed, we couldn't get in touch with them. But they had said that there will be some fluidity to cash flow and uses and so forth. So if you feel like you need to use funding for a certain reason or purpose, and it seems germane, then proceeding is a good thing as long as you keep receipts. And if there seems to be pushback or what have you, that's when maybe we'll have to do a retroactive rule or statutory change. Now, that said, if you ever feel too uncomfortable in doing that, then you just reach out to me, as Wayman and Matthew have been. Those were the main issues that Matthew and Wayman have raised to me, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer, and Charlie and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, good. Well, thank you so much for that. And there may well be some questions from committee members. Again, remind folks, if you have questions, to please identify that by the raising of the hand or in the chat room.
Chairman Steck,
Yes.
Ted Vaughn.
Yes.
We
Commissioner Vaughn.
received an initial Band-Aid for the airport, and airports have been devastated. Is there anything more coming down the pike in relationship to airports?
It is definitely, thank you, Commissioner. It is something that they are also considering. And yes, I'm aware of the amount of funding that you received, and it is a Band-Aid. And you, again, you are not alone in that. We are hearing from airports across the country who are in a similar situation. So yes, stay tuned.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Awesome.
Ponstein.
Commissioner Ponstein?
Thank you, Chair Stack. So I guess my question is kind of a big picture question. The lobbyists had said that Congress feels a lot of the problems of the states and counties and cities and townships are from poor spending practices. Yet, as I look at the national debt clock, we're over 25 trillion now. And it seems kind of funny that people are lecturing us about poor spending practices. You know, in the packages that they've sent out, why is it so hard for them not just to do a clean bill that only deals with COVID instead of throwing everything that's in the laundry bin over the past year that hasn't been funded?
Thank you, Commissioner. I can't answer it specifically, but I can break it down into just a couple of examples. The Paycheck Protection Program was something that was created in a record amount of time, and I think that there were certainly some. It was an imperfect program for sure. The payout programs to assist states and municipalities was imperfect for sure. There are other programs that did go into health agencies, for example, and they were crafted in a way that were consistent with previous law. So those funds were placed in with the knowledge that whether it's the IG or their budget counsel in those agencies knew that there still had to be deliverables. So I am not trying to make a case for the legislators or against them. I am simply telling you what has happened in my observations. I can't disagree with your sentiments, but I would say that my own, the last time I saw this was during 9/11. Now this is so much worse than that for sure, but I recall money going out the door during 9/11 because they didn't know when the next wave would hit or what it would look like, and money went out the door to FEMA, HHS, Department of Justice, and so forth, and these local entities and state entities were purchasing equipment they would just never have needed. I think it was a reaction to fear and to responding to constituents. But then you're talking more about how people think and so forth. And that's, I can't comment anymore, but that's my observation, Commissioner.
Mr. Skaggs.
All right, Commissioner Skaggs.
Thank you, Chair. Just thanks for the information. I guess I'm also interested in the lobbying aspects. That is, what are you hearing from the folks that represent Kent County, Representatives Amash and Huizenga and Senators Piezers and Stabenow, and where are they on these issues of trying to get some money back down to the counties and all? Obviously, we're hearing about that we should try bankruptcy, which I just have to echo Commissioner Ponstein's light-handed discussion of hypocrisy. But I just wonder, where are our representatives on these things, and what are we doing to change opinions as opposed to just note opinions?
Thank you, Commissioner. It's a great question. Every question so far has been fantastic, and especially in this situation of the unknown. I will say that your delegation is very strong and extremely engaged. Your two senators and Congressman Huizenga could not be more involved and engaged in ensuring that the state and the local governments are made whole, and that the PPE is in place and so forth. Those have been the lawmakers that we have engaged most. I have not reached out to Congressman Amash's office as much, but I can just tell you, I can only comment on those three. I would like to address, though, something that your frustrations are noted, and they're certainly worthy of your anxiety. A lot of these so-called red states receive enormous amounts of federal resources, whether it's infrastructure or healthcare. So the people who say that the so-called blue states are the ones that need the funding, I can assure you, having done this for 30 years, I know where the budget goes, and a lot of these red states receive a lot of federal resources. So you are not incorrect in your angst. Did that answer your question, however, Commissioner?
Yeah, I think so. I just, what I'm most interested in and getting from you guys is, the extent that we possibly can to have some sort of united bipartisan front to do the things that we all know need to be done, whether it's funding for testing, for PPE, for contact tracing, for making up for revenues that we're losing through certainly no fault of our own. I mean, we're basically in a disaster situation. It's distressing to hear that we have to wait until maybe June. And, I suppose I shall be patient. But at some point, I think we need to be doing everything we possibly can to make sure that the opinions that are making it difficult to get funding to states, and I don't care what color they are, the states that need this aid and that need this support, which is the purpose for the federal government, at least one of them. I just want to work on changing some opinions, and I don't know if those are opinions of the representatives that represent Kent County, or if we can at least get everyone from Michigan on board. I know that's not your job, but perhaps partnering with others to really work and try to find some bipartisan solutions as we do everything possibly to keep this focused on helping people and limiting the virus as opposed to other stuff.
Well,
So that's my biggest concern.
you're on the front lines. You are on the front lines, and it's not just a matter of voting. I can imagine that when you walk down the street, or if you happen to go into a supermarket, people know who you are, and you can't just cast a vote and say, this is what I've done. You've got to deliver, and I get that. Look, the best thing that I could advise you is to continue to engage your members of Congress, and that includes the House and Senate, but also engage your state lawmakers. Call them to task. I don't mean to, stray outside of where I should be, but you've hit the nail on the head. And this is the one thing that I've brought to DC. It is that Kent County, West Michigan way of lawmaking. I got my Eagle Scout Award in Jerry Ford's museum, and I know that he could bridge these gaps. And I know that Bill Huizenga has worked closely with Senator Peters in the past on a bill that helped our automotive industry. And I know that there's bipartisanship. Debbie Stabenow works very closely with Chairman Roy Blunt, who's a conservative from Missouri, who's the chairman of the Labor, Health, Human Services, Education Appropriations Subcommittee. They work on mental health issues. They work on healthcare issues. So there is what we do tend to see a lot is the vitriol, because that's what hits the press. But if you get these folks together, you see that they actually do work together. But you've got to continue to apply your pressure and your frustrations and say, please work together. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Commissioner Skaggs, does that address your questions? All right, thank you. Commissioner Hennessy.
Thank you. I wanted to see if there's any more information available on what Senator Stabenow is doing to help with the USDA with agriculture. Agriculture and agribusiness is, of course, important to this area. And we're hearing word that there'll be shortages of this or that'll extend to food as we move further down the road. So is there any kind of an update on what's happening there, especially for the smaller farmers?
I'll have to look into that, Commissioner, because I have not followed as closely the USDA. I will say that there's been an increased effort in ensuring that the food supply is safe, I know that lawmakers are drawing more of their attention to the FDA and ensuring safe processing practices. But I will have to get back to you on a more specific response to that. But I know that she's been fully engaged on the pandemic challenges generally.
Thank you.
Steve, if I may add that in our most recent newsletter, we see that Senator Stabenow has been very engaged in hearings over the $16 billion that has been appropriated from USDA for lost sales in agriculture. And I know she's been very engaged in that in her position as ranking member on the Ag Committee. There's also $3 billion in that that will provide funding to go for food commodities to go directly to food banks. So we could provide more information on that as we see it, but I know she's been very active in there. We'd like to include more of those reports in our weekly newsletters to the folks on what's happening in DC, because that's a very important issue.
Thank you.
All right, any other commissioners? I don't see any other hands up in the chat room. Mary Beth, anything else?
No, no further questions.
Maybe just one follow-up, Steve. You talked a little bit about the Federal Reserve loan program. What are the unique advantages of the utilization of that kind of loan program for a local entity?
I'm going to turn that over to Charlie, who's been following. We've, as you can gather, have been splitting up responsibilities on these $2 trillion packages. Charlie, can you respond to the chairman, please?
Yes, and your question was about some of the local loan programs and how they would be administered. I think it would help, instead of going into that, is maybe provide some of the more recent guidance that we're getting from Treasury. Might be able to handle some of the questions a little better about issues such as the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. But if you could state some of your questions again, if you don't mind, just some of the specific issues, maybe we can get back to you about that.
Yeah, we
So
can.
you'd like the chairman to maybe give you more specific questions, Charlie, and maybe get it to us? Is that what you're asking for?
If that would be okay.
No, that's fine. I just obviously $2 trillion in loans through the Federal Reserve is a significant package, and to the extent that offers local entities such as Kent County alternatives in the event that we have unmet needs through the other processes and other funding packages, I'd want to have maximum knowledge about how we do that. So,
yeah, and again, a lot of things just came out just recently, and I think there is more clarification that needs to be addressed, and we can, provide any answers to any specific questions, and we have some contacts over at Treasury who can also help us in answering these questions.
very good. Well, again, thank you to Steve and to Charlie for your presentation, for your work. Thank you for being available this morning to meet with the committee. Still look forward. I thought maybe April would be our first face-to-face with you, but we still look forward to that at some point here in the future. So again, thank you for your participation.
It's our pleasure. And again, I cannot thank you enough for the opportunity to work for my home county. Be safe, everybody.
Thank you again.
Take care.
All right. Let's move to item number 4, which is a report from Public Affairs Association. Becky Beckler, we're going to get a state perspective on all of this.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is nice to be with you, even though it is via Zoom, but as we all probably are now accustomed to meeting this way, I'm sure you're very familiar with it. I also want to welcome Commissioner Teal to the first meeting, at least that I've been participating in, and look forward to working with her on this committee. It's just been a mere 48 days since the governor declared the state of emergency for Michigan, and quickly following that, she did a stay-at-home order, which changed the ability for the legislature to meet quite dramatically. Since that time, they have only come to Lansing twice. The first time was to simply extend her emergency powers. She had requested 28 days and they gave her 23 days, which brings us to this week and the fact that the emergency powers are set to expire Thursday evening. Yesterday, the governor sent a letter to the legislature asking them to extend the emergency powers another 28 days. And here's where we have a potential, I guess, disagreement brewing this week on the emergency powers. The governor has the authority to extend the emergency powers on her own because there are two competing acts dealing with the governor's powers. One from 1945, which states that they don't need legislative approval, and then one from 1976, which says that they do need legislative approval to extend it. The reason why the governor wants the legislature to approve it is because when they approve the emergency powers, the ability to extend liability protections for our frontline workers comes along with that. That's something that she's not able to push along. So if they were not to do that, then it really puts at risk some of the liability for the nurses and doctors that are in our hospitals and nursing homes and other healthcare settings. So this is really setting the stage this week for a conversation. Republicans want a seat at the table when it comes to plans for restarting the economy. They are very frustrated that we are the most stringent state in the nation when it comes to the stay-at-home policy. And they want to work with the governor as far as what those professions and industries are as they come forward. So I think you will see that play out this week. When the legislature came back on Friday, this last Friday, they did a couple things just to kind of tee this up even further. At first, they set up a bipartisan, bicameral oversight committee to examine the processes for government over the COVID situation. And so that will begin meeting, I would assume, very shortly. But the Senate also attempted to limit the powers of the government when I referenced those two competing acts. So the Senate repealed the Public Act of 1945, which gives her autonomy from the legislature on this power. And then on the 1976 Act, they reduced it from 28 days to 14 days. Now the governor has said she will veto this legislation. We're not sure if the House even plans to take it up. But clearly the Senate Majority Leader is setting the stage of, I want to see the table, and they see this as the only way to get her attention. Now the governor has already started to make indications that she's planning to restate the economy, restart the economy. On Monday, the commission that she put together, a council, Michigan Economic Recovery Council, did join her for a press conference, which talks about how we re-engage our economy. And they really did it based on a regional report. Their recommendations were based on a regional report. And then their second phase was dealing with what type of businesses are low risk versus high risk interaction with the public. The governor has indicated that as long as the trajectory of hospitalizations continue to go down and the ability to test to go up, and there's low risk in the low risk categories, she's likely to start to expand and open up those industries. She's already talked about the fact that I think in the next few days, she will talk about construction, being able to restart our construction, as well as some of the other outdoor enterprises that are currently not allowed. And if you recall, last week, she did some of that as allowing individuals to travel between residencies, motorized boating, golfing, lawn services, landscaping, and nursing. She opened nurseries to open that up. So I think you will see this week with the legislature returning today and tomorrow and Thursday on a limited basis. The Senate Majority Leader said yesterday that he thinks maybe only one committee meeting will be held. And basically, they're just trying to figure out the right protocols to keep everybody safe as they meet under this new social distancing requirements. So they'll begin to do that. But I think you will see some, I guess, gamesmanship as to how the Senate Majority Leader, the Speaker of the House, and the governor work this out on the emergency powers, and that will happen this week. Then our next big issue that the legislature is going to have to deal with sooner versus later is the dire straits of the state budget. And I know Steve had talked about a little bit about the state crisis in our budget, but Michigan clearly has got significant concerns when it comes to our current year budget, as well as the budget that they are working on for 2021. As we sit here today, the budget director believes that the deficit for the current year budget that we are in is anywhere from $1 to $3 billion in deficit. And for the budget for 2020, 2021, it's anywhere from $1 billion to $4 billion in deficit. They had U of M economists do a similar estimate, and they estimated $2.6 billion for the current year and $3.2 billion for 2021. So no one's really far off in its projections. As Steve pointed out, in the Federal CARES Act, there is money coming to the state, about $3.8 billion. And $800 million is for local units of more than 500,000, which would be Wayne, Oakland, I believe Macomb, and then Kent County would be eligible for those funds. So those are the 4 entities. But that leaves $3.1 billion that the state can use only for costs incurred for COVID expenses. And those costs that happen between March 1st and December 30th. The budget director is holding on to that money, or hoarding that money, if you will, in hopes that the federal government either gives the states flexibility on how they can use that money. What they want to be able to do is to backfill the shortfall in their state budget to use that money, or come up with additional resources for state and local governments, as Steve's indicated that they may do in June. So right now they're just sitting on that money in hopes that they can use it. If the federal government does not give them flexibility, it will only be able to use for COVID expenses. So what is the legislature going to do to address this situation? Is that here's the timeline that I think everybody has set out. There is a revenue estimating conference on May 15th, and they will use those numbers to try to address the current year budget shortfall. So on May 15th, the House Fiscal Agency, the Senate Fiscal Agency, the governor's office, and an economist from the University of Michigan and Michigan State University get together, and they come up with a consensus as to how much revenue we have or don't have for the current year. They'll take those numbers and then try to adjust the budget. The trick with that, or the complicating factor, is that we are 2/3 done with that budget. So we'll be cutting a budget that we've already expended 2/3 of the year. They have 2 options. The governor can issue an executive order, which would be essentially cutting the budget through an executive order that is only then has to be adopted by the House and the Senate Appropriations Committee. The full legislature does not have to approve it. So that's one option. And option B is the legislature could negotiate a negative supplemental, and that would run through the normal legislative process. It would be introduced, go to the Appropriations Committee, then adopted by the full House, go to the Senate, same process. It appears that they are leaning toward an executive order. That seems to be where the legislators keep talking about executive order, and the governor seems to reference that as well, the budget director. And there are some time frames. So I think after the 15th, you will see some type of legislative meetings occurring, trying to decide how they're going to cut that budget, given the numbers that they have, and they will move relatively quickly, if not by the end of May, early June, to try to complete that activity for the current year budget. Then they have to move to the 2021 budget very quickly as well. Normally, in a normal budget year, here we are coming up on May, we would be in mid-throes of the budget. Because of the stay-at-home order, we are pretty much behind. The budget director has indicated that they're going to need an additional revenue estimating conference. So they're going to look at August. We're going to take a look at the numbers in August, because they want to capture the income tax money from the July 15th. As you know, the governor delayed the income tax filings to July 15th, along with the federal filings. So that money will have come in, and they think they will have a better picture of the state budget in August. So in mid-August, I think you will see another revenue estimating conference, and then from there, legislators in the executive office can go about finalizing that budget. So if you, in talking with legislators, and as well as the budget director, Chris Cole, he believes that the budget for the upcoming year will probably be resolved in September, because that's when they'll have the most accurate information. So those are the challenges that we face going forward. They're significant challenges. The state does have a $1.2 billion rainy day fund, and if it's not raining, I don't know what rainy day fund could be used for. But there are also some stipulations as to how that can be used and how much can be withdrawn. Now, the legislature could repeal those actions. They could change that to give them more flexibility, and I think there's some consideration of that as well. but there's only a limited amount of resources to backfill our budget, both for the current year and going forward. So we have ourselves quite the situation. I think originally legislative leaders hoped to get the budget done the first couple weeks of June, be out of here. It is an election year for the House of Representatives. In theory, they wanted to be out campaigning and knocking door to door, and I'm not sure that is going to happen at all this year. But instead, we've got a different relationship, a different working relationship, and so that's what we are dealing with over the next coming weeks, is just probably only the budget. There may be some other issues, policy issues, but right now legislators are not talking about any additional policy issues other than stabilizing our budget. So that's what's going on in Lansing. As I said, the legislators are in town this week. I don't think you will see very many people in the Capitol. They can't close it off. It is a public building, but they are keeping protocols pretty tight as to how they meet. So it's going to take a long time to really complete any activity that they want to do today. I would be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
All right, thank you, Beck. Challenging task to know what's going on out there sitting in your living room, huh?
Exactly.
All right, questions from the committee?
Feinstein.
Commissioner Ponstein?
Thank you, Chair Steck. Becky, welcome.
Thank you.
So lovely to see you on this beautiful sunny day.
It is beautiful.
So last week I had a video conference with the governor, and yesterday I had a video conference with Senator Stamas. And it just seems like they're working off two different sets of numbers. The governor likes to state the 1 to 3 billion in debt this year, and then 1 to 4. Yet Stamas and the Senate believe that it's the high end that's the truth in these, and that the shortfall this year is going to be close to 3 billion, and the following year it's going to be close to 4 billion. Going forward, obviously you've got two different parties working, but it just seems like a broken system. Stamas says that you're going to be kidding yourself as a county if you don't think revenue sharing is going to be cut. And I reminded him during the call that, that's not just the only issue facing counties. We're still dealing with PFAS that I don't know if we've really been fully reimbursed for. The mental health system in this state is crumbling, and yet we've got people that are just throwing their hands up. We don't know what to do except cut. So any general response to that? And then the other side would be just, the revenue side. And, I'm going to deny this all my life that I'd ever bring up additional revenues. But, when you see gas prices approaching $1 a gallon, there could be at least a temporary increase that would keep it well below $2 a gallon. So any thoughts?
Sure, absolutely. And the question was asked, and like many of you here at PA, we're doing a Zoom call with legislative leaders 2 and 3 times a day. And I've had similar conversations with Senator Stamas, and the Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey kind of addressed your point about the discrepancy and discrepancy in the numbers. The Senate Republicans are much more aggressively leaning towards the higher numbers. They would rather plan for the worst and then scale them back, rather than the I guess take a number that's too low and then have to do additional cutting. So they're being a little bit more aggressive on their numbers in hopes that they could scale it back versus have to increase the cuts later. We do have a challenging situation. You're on point with the Republicans and Democrats are, again, like we saw in the budget process, struggling to work together. The Senate Majority Leader, even in a podcast that he did last week, indicated that it had been 2 weeks since he had talked to the governor, which I think everyone in the state was a little alarmed that the Senate Majority Leader and the Speaker were not talking to the governor on at least an every other day basis. So there's a little bit of breakdown communication. A lot of it is over the stay-at-home order. The Senate Majority Leader is very angry about it and concerned about the unemployment. So to your answer about additional revenue, a lot of people are asking about that. I think the challenge is you've got the House of Representatives up for re-election. Republicans tend not to want to increase taxes, especially in an election year. So that's going to be a problem. And you also have a huge unemployment numbers that they fear that adding another tax onto individuals that are unemployed could be devastating to families. So you've got some terrible challenges ahead with not a lot of good answers, but that's where we are right now. And that's why you see the difference at this moment.
And then just one quick follow-up. Becky, is there any way you can get us information? I mean, there's a lot of different sources of revenues where maybe the gas tax, we're not collecting what we did, which is obvious. But, you know, I've heard reports and working in the business that I work in where liquor sales are up 50% in this state. What does that fund look like going forward? And are there other revenue piles that seem to be stable or have an increase versus the negative that we hear that everything is just not coming in?
Yeah, so why don't I would be happy to reach out to either the House or the Senate or both fiscal agencies as well as Director Kolb and ask him if he has any type of information that I could send to you that would give you a breakdown of where they are right now and some projections going forward. Let me see what I can get for you on those specific numbers, and we can go from there.
Mr. Talon.
Commissioner Ponstein, is that, you had your hand up a second time, does that address that?
That was just a courtesy reply wave.
Thank you.
It's not a hand up, it's a wave. Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. Becky, good morning. Just to follow up on Commissioner Ponstein's reference to revenue sharing, that is my biggest concern, and I think probably a lot of our largest concern. Can you suggest what we should be doing to help protect that revenue source? Both commissioners and county administrative staff, what should we be doing right now to set the stage for protecting that huge source of revenue for us?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Talon. I believe that we need to continue to talk with our legislators and educate them on the need for revenue funding for the counties, that cutting revenue sharing is only going to further deplete the resources of counties that they continue to reference. So I would be happy to put together some Zoom calls with some of our state legislators. They need to understand that while they're making cuts, a cut to revenue sharing is devastating for our local governments. I know I've had a Zoom call with the budget director with some of the MAC personalities, and we've tried to implore with Chris Kolb that as you look at cuts, this is something that should be left aside. And I think we need to continue to let legislators know so that when they have a seat at the table, that is something that they do set aside and say we cannot cut revenue sharing. But we've got to implore that with our legislators across the state. I think we need our other county friends and colleagues to do the same thing so we're a united voice.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Commissioner Melton.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Becky.
Good morning.
Statement followed by a question. I did send it out on the chat. So I'll start with a question, and that is the dollars and amounts and things that you stated today as far as what's being discussed with the governor versus the House and the Senate. Could you, or Congress, would you be able to, without too much extra work, put some of that down in a way that we can share that with our constituents? Probably the number one thing that I am hearing the most is the confusion. And I think it's just because there is confusion. There's confusion because this is so different. And while I understand that, I think the more factual, concrete information that we can get in front of our constituents here in the county would be very, very helpful. So I don't know if that's something you can do or not, or willing to do, but that would certainly help me a lot to help my constituents.
Absolutely. And would it be okay, Commissioner, if I got that to you, say Thursday afternoon? Because then I could include what the legislature and the governor actually agreed to this week, and I think it would be a little bit more beneficial to you. Also up on the screen, just for reference, PAA puts out a COVID update. We have been doing it every day. We're going to now move it to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you are more willing, if you would like to receive a copy, make sure that you let the folks at the county know that you want to receive that. We'd be happy to get it to you. We've also done several Zoom calls with legislative leaders as well as folks within the governor's office, Lieutenant Governor, that hopefully some of you have been able to join. As we continue to do those, we'll make sure that you're included if you would like to be for further updates. But yes, I'd be happy to put together a summary.
Thank you. And just a follow-up statement, tagging on something that you said, and it was alluded to with our other two presenters also being an election year. I don't know how best to let them know. In my opinion, with all that's going on between the death rate in Michigan, the disease rate in Michigan, the unemployment in Michigan, the uncertainty of things, personally, I think that the last thing on anyone's mind leading our state should be it's an election year. That's just my own personal statement. Whether or not it's an election year should not have anything to do with the decisions that are being made when so many in our state are suffering in one way or another. Just my statement.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other commissioners with a question?
No.
All right, I don't see any others other than myself, so I'll use my prerogative. Becky, if you could just follow up a little bit on the $3 billion that the state has available to it, I think is its distribution out of the CARES Act. You'd indicated that those monies are available, being held pending possible modifications for its use. What happens if if the use is not changed? These are funds that have to be distributed by the end of the year or simply allocated by the end of the year?
I believe they need to be distributed by the end of the year, between March 1st and December. They're to cover costs for that time period. The 800 million is separate. The 800 million should be going out to those counties and municipalities of over 500,000. The 3.1 billion is what the executive office and the budget director are holding back, hoping for flexibility. But because it can only be spent for COVID operations, they're limited. So that's what they're waiting on, that flexibility. It sounds like from Steve's report, we'll have to wait for June to get any type of indication of how that can be used.
So again, is that money that can only be used for COVID expenses incurred by the state, or does the state have the ability to allocate that across the state, perhaps not to the 4 counties who get direct contributions, but to the rest of the state?
Let me check on that, whether it is the cost specific to the state purchasing or any other entities. Let me do clarification on that, because the budget director was not clear how that spells out right now.
All right, good. Thank you for that. Any other questions? If not, thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Turn to your other screen and go to work, huh?
Thank you very much.
All right. Let's move to item number 5. This is the state legislative priorities report. And Waymon, will you present that?
Sure. This is a request to the Board of Commissioners to approve the 2020 legislative priorities, state legislative priorities. Chair Bolter and Board Vice Chair and Chair of the Legislative and Human Resources Committee, Stan Steck, and Board Vice Chair, along with Administrator's Office staff, met with Becky Beckler from the Public Affairs Associates to discuss the priorities for the 2020 legislative session. And based on these conversations and outreach to Commissioner Talon, Legislative and Human Resources Vice Chair, a proposed list of 2020 state priorities have been created A document that summarizes the changes between the 2019 and 2020 state priorities is also attached to this recommendation.
All right, this has been distributed as part of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It is
Betsy.
It is moved by Commissioner Melton to approve. Is there a support?
Support by Ponstein.
Supported by Commissioner Ponstein. Is there any questions from the committee? I see a hand up from Commissioner Skaggs.
So obviously, compared to last year's, this is a much it takes up a lot fewer pages. So I wonder what was the reasoning behind sort of trimming some of these things down to such sort of short statements. I mean, I noted on priority 4 on environmental contamination that we decided to, or it was decided to take out the word scientific based standards and replace them with safe. And I guess I have my concerns here that these have become so vague. You know, we're for governance that promotes efficient and effective systems of service. I don't know what that means. I don't know if our lobbyist knows what it means. It seems that we've taken out a lot of specifics, and it's so generic. I'm concerned that it doesn't really give any guidance to our lobbyists or our staff as to what our policies really are. So what were the reasons why we decided, or why, I guess, the two of you who worked on this decided to do this?
So I'll respond to that, Commissioner, though I don't think it was just the two of us that worked on it, but Commissioner Talon and I did go back through the drafting on a number of occasions. I think, first of all, you'll note that the actual points of priorities really have not changed materially from where we were last year. There was some discussion about whether or not we would add some additional points, but as the conversation evolved in this year and the COVID-19 pandemic and response to that took over most of the attention, the thinking was that we would simply hold tight to the 5 key ones that we had addressed and adopted last year. We did look at simplifying that. Yes, it is less text than it was before, but it was also with the intent that we would identify the interest of the county without connecting it to a specific piece of legislation that may or may not be actively engaged or under deliberation. So there was that intention, and as well to provide our efforts maximum flexibility as we moved into discussions with legislators, taking our key interests as stated in the priorities and allowing us to have the flexibility of pushing those before the legislators as specific pieces of legislation may have come before it. I think ultimately it is our expectation that over the course of this year, in all candor, the conversations with our legislatures are likely to be focused primarily on the budgetary issues and dealing with the response and addressing the cost of the response to the COVID-19 mitigation strategies. So all of those factors were in the consideration, and then ultimately just Commissioner Talon and I going back and forth on the drafting, taking input from, I believe, everyone on this committee and input from a number of our other commissioners on the Finance Committee in arriving at this. I will say as well that we did take these restated priorities back to key countywide elected officials to have them review them and identify if they had any concerns and what their support was. I will say that the sheriff has indicated her support for these, as has the prosecutor. Now, Commissioner Talon, do you have anything else you want to respond to that?
No, Chair Stack, that was a great summary. Thanks.
Commissioner Ponstein.
Commissioner Bonstein?
Thank you, Chair Steck. So I kind of agree with what the other Stan said at the end, is that, we've got to keep these as broad base as we can so we don't tie us down to a specific issue. And I think it helps the lobbyists navigate things that we may not have thought of that come up throughout the year. But what's interesting on these priorities, every one of them is in the brown on the right, which is a funding issue. And, we've got to be, I think, more active than ever before because, I'm in the school of thought that revenue sharing is not going to be protected. And we're going to have to fight hard for that. And just looking at our priorities of what the shortfall already is, and we're going to be trying just to protect what we've got, is going to be challenging. So, as broad and open we keep our priorities, it'll allow the lobbyists to act in different ways and more nimble ways.
All right, thank you. Commissioner, any other comments?
Not seeing any here, Chair.
All right, with that, let's go ahead and vote and take a roll call vote on this, Pam.
Commissioner Hennessy,
Yes.
Commissioner Common,
Yes.
Melton,
Yes.
Constein,
Yes.
Skaggs,
Yes.
Talon,
Yes.
Bonk,
Yes.
Teal,
Yes.
Chair Steck,
Yes.
and that motion passes.
All right, thank you. Let's move to item number 6, which is the pension board appointment. Raymond?
Yes, this is a request to appoint Commissioner Stan Ponstein to the pension board to fill an unexpired 3-year term ending December 31, 2020. Effective March 15, 2020, former Commissioner Jim Sawfeld resigned his position as County Commissioner for District 11. As a result of his resignation, a mid-term commissioner vacancy has occurred on the pension board. It's recommended that Commissioner Stan Ponstein be appointed to the pension board to fill the unexpired term ending December 31, 2020.
Is there a motion to approve that appointment?
So moved.
Support. Hennessy.
Moved by Commissioner Melton and supported by Commissioner Hennessy. Any discussion?
Commissioner Ponstein.
Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Steck. So just for clarification, and most of you know that I already sit on the pension board. We've had 3 vacancies within the last year and a half. And I think, especially on times like this, there was some concern about ongoing consistency of the pension board. The current term I have is a yearly renewal. So I think the thought of the chair was to slide me over into Jim's position, though it expires this year, is more of a multi-year to give maybe a little, not so much stability, but just consistency going forward. And then obviously we'll come back with the appointment to replace my 1-year term.
Thank you for that clarification. You are correct, though I will suggest that consistency and competency are both behind the proposal. Any other comments?
No hands raised.
All right, if no other comments from the board, will you go ahead and take the roll? Pam?
Commissioner Hennessy,
Yes.
Common,
Yes.
Melton,
Yes.
Constein,
Yes.
Skaggs,
Yes.
Talon,
Yes.
Bonk,
Yes.
Teal,
Yes.
Chair Stack,
Yes.
and that motion passes.
All right, good, great. Let's move on then to item number 7, miscellaneous. If any of the board members have a miscellaneous comment.
Onstein.
Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you again, Chair Stack. So I think the rest of the year is going to be very interesting for this committee. There's going to be a lot of moving parts. It is an election year, whether we like it or not. So I'm sure a layer of politics is going to be involved in some decision making at the federal and at the state level. So I just want to suggest that, you know, not so much step up our game, but maybe ramp it up. Becky had made a comment that she meets on a regular basis with the legislators and our representatives. And I think it maybe it'd be a good idea for, and the whole committee doesn't have to do it, but set up Zoom meetings. I know Representative Huizenga has done them with some local officials. And I think a lot of them are, you know, they're not going into Lansing. So I know with Senator Stamas is that he does these Zoom meetings pretty much every day with different constituencies. So maybe we can work with people to try to set some of these up to reaffirm what, you know, what problems and unique circumstances that Kent County has. I know that I tried to bring up as much as possible to Senator Stamas about, you know, what it's like in Kent County. And it's not just COVID. There's so many things that that's affecting. One is our hotel motel tax revenue, what that will mean to the county budget if there's a huge shortfall in that. I brought up that still, you know, there's a lot of unanswered questions about PFAS, mental health, and, you know, the list can go on. I appreciate the staff giving me information ahead of that meeting, and a final shout out to Mary Beth, because I'm getting pretty good at this. I don't know if you all like just my name or my face, but you know, at least my voice is coming through, and I can see all of you. So thanks for the staff of getting this, and hopefully better days are ahead when we can meet in person.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Any other comment? Any other names coming up?
No, no other names, Commissioner.
All right, just a couple of things that I'm going to report on. First of all, while we did fill one appointment here, and these are difficult times to fill the last few remaining appointments, we do have a couple of openings on some of our county boards. We continue to reach out. I know our fire board still is functioning with an opening. So we'll continue our efforts to find those, and when we're able to do so, bring those back to the committee for approval. Also, we did approve the state priorities. You'll recall that last year we did approve a set of federal priorities, and so the intention is we'll follow up with those as we go forward through the year. And then finally, again, welcome Commissioner Teal. This is your first meeting on the legislative committee, so we look forward to your participation. And with that, if there is nothing else, this is probably going to be a format we'll likely use for the next meeting as well. We'll see how things progress, but it appears that pretty much everybody has learned the technology. In fact, Betsy's raised her hand with a hand over the camera. That's a good move. I hadn't known that worked before. But so anyway, everyone stay safe. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. We are adjourned.